Yeah, well, you know, that's like just your opinion, man.
Okay, so hello and welcome to the Audio Opinion Show, where audio people gather to give their opinions about things because for some reason I thought that would make a compelling, interesting thing for people to do. Time will tell. So anyway, I am joined by a number of my favorite audio people and 2 or 3 of my unfavorite audio people. I will leave it to them and others to decide which is which. My name is Brian Maddox. I'm normally joined by Andy Broughton, but he unfortunately has this job where he runs around with a band and does sound. I don't really understand what he does. It's weird. He's like on a bus and they do shows or something. I don't get what he does, but the rest of us are going to sit around here and talk about microphones because that's what we do, because we can't find jobs and we're all by ourselves on a Thursday night or a Friday morning if we happen to be in the Philippines. Anyway, welcome to all, and we're going to do what we always do at the beginning of the Audio Opinion Show, which is start with the most important question. And the most important question today is, in TPB, and if you do not know what TPB is, then just stop watching, get off my show. In TPB, what does Buttercup never call Wesley? What does Buttercup never call Wesley? I'd like to note before I read off the options, multiple choice is a possibility. Anyway, the options are Farm Boy or Farm Boy, My One True Love, Killer, My Sweet Wesley, and the ever popular Wallace Shawn. So, what does Buttercup never call Wesley? Is it 1, Farm Boy or Farm Boy? Is it My One True Love? Is it Killer? Is it My Sweet Wesley? Or is it Wallace Shawn? I see many votes have come in. Many votes have come in. I'm going to assume that everyone who's voted has voted. So I'm going to end the poll. I'm going to share the results. The results say that Wallace Shawn was the number 1 answer with 10 votes. Correct. It is correct. Buttercup never actually calls Wesley Wallace Shawn. I feel like she should have. I mean, I can't think of a better term of endearment than Wallace Shawn. But the other answer that seems to have topped the pile, and spoiler alert, there were 2 right answers. One of them was Wallace Shawn. The second one that tops the list is Killer. Killer is not correct. Killer is what she calls Wesley at the top of the hill when he is still wearing his Dread Pirate Roberts outfit. And before she pushes him over the embankment and he rolls down, and then she says, My Sweet Wesley, and then she rolls down behind him, etc. So the one thing she never calls him is My One True Love, which is ironical because he was her one true love. Anyway, that's it. We're done for the show. Princess Bride questions have been answered. Thank you very much. See you next time. Yeah, everybody's like, really? That took a lot of time, Brian. Can we get on with it? All right. Our topic for today, we are going to launch the topic for today. This is the thing that we will talk about today. Possibility number 1, which has been on the list for about 3 months and no one's ever picked it, but I just will not give it up. What's the, quote, next big thing in audio, unquote? Number 2, what do you think is talked about too much in audio? It can't be intercom. We've talked about that too much already. What do you think is talked about too much in audio? 3, plugins. How do we feel about these no longer new things? Finger quotes, no longer new things, plugins. And lastly, and this is a positions question. We've talked about this before, but it's been a while. Front of house, monitors, system tech, broadcast A1, RF, intercom. You can bring up something else. This is the part of the question, the part of the answer I want to emphasize. If you had a magic wand, so never mind what you've done before, if you could just wave a magic wand and you could be any position that you wanted for the rest of your career and you would make tons of money, what would be your preference? And lastly, but not leastly, topic for the day, Wallace Shawn. So again, our topics are, and what's the next best thing in audio? What do you think is talked about too much in audio? Plugins, how do we feel about these no longer new things? Front of house monitor, systems tech, broadcast A1, RF, or comms. If you had a magic wand, what would you be? And last but not least, Wallace Shawn. I'm going to give us 5, 4, 3, last chance, 2, 1, and ending the poll. And I think there were a couple of very, very quick last second votes, which is a good thing because at least we have a winner. It was a tie before, which is part of why I was stretching it out. Inside baseball. So it does appear by a very narrow margin that tonight we're going to talk about positions, types of roles in audio. If you had a magic wand and could have any of the various positions, and I didn't talk about install tech or networking engineer or any number of other different radio, field recorder, movie recorder, so any of them, like literally anything that you can think of. If you could wave a magic wand, know that you could pay your rent, pay your mortgage, retire comfortably, you'd make plenty of money just from a doing the job standpoint. What is a job that you would do? It can be the one that you've already done or are currently doing. Do I have anybody willing to jump on the grenade first, or I'm going, there we go. John Erskine, also known as Pete, is going to jump on the grenade.
So strangely enough, I've always been very envious of broadcast A1s because they're sitting there in this little room and all this sound is coming at them and everybody's talking and bang, their finger shoots out and they play music when something happens and you don't hear a cue for that. You didn't do it. And I thought that would be pretty cool, but that's too much work for me. So I just do comms.
So I guess the takeaway is, in case you think the intercom techs work hard, for some reason Pete thinks that like it's too much work to sit in an air-conditioned truck and do this every so often. This, I might have to do two.
Well, no, it's a little more than that because they've got all this talent out there that are talking, and they've got these different segments of the show that are happening. And they have to know what music plays when, and it's a whole routine. And it probably comes from my days as a radio engineer. There was this really, really how do you say, hard DJ you had to do play records with, and he expected you to know every song that was popular, and to have the next song he was thinking of ready to go. And I never engineered for him except for 15 minutes on one show, and it was a disaster. I didn't know anything he was thinking, so I figured I'd just do comms.
Because, I would also pick broadcast engineer, although not doing sports. that is a lot of work, and in a truck. I mean, not only are you listening to the audio and mixing, you also have at least one intercom panel on it that is yakking all the time. You're working in a very difficult environment.
Jason Lynch, which we both have worked with a lot, terrific sports and entertainment and event to it. He has his intercom, his director over here, right. His AD coming out over here, the general comm coming out of the floor, all different directions, which I think it makes it much easier for him to figure out what's going on.
Oh yeah, it makes it easier, but that doesn't mean it's easy. I mean, that's a very high pressure and confusing environment. And
I was going to second that, Pete. Yeah, I have at least a minimum of three things. What I'm actually doing: a director hot mic and a producer hot mic. And you generally try to put the director over my left shoulder and the producer over my right shoulder, because I don't know these people from Adam. A lot of times, like day before yesterday, I've never met these people before. They're from New York. They all got bad attitudes. Everything that's wrong with the truck is my fault. They came in with all their music on a SD card. I got a zip disk digicart. Okay, that doesn't work, but it's my fault because that's the truck they hired. And then usually there's an intercom panel that I deal with the A2. So information overload in the sports environment is by the end of the night, I don't even know what the score was when the game's over, because I'm just listening to all this stuff.
Yeah. And then while you're listening to all of those different people trying to communicate, and you've got to pick up on cues and listen for things and be sharp, what percentage of your brain is left to listen to program, what you're actually mixing?
Yeah, when I pick that as the field I would want, it's because that's the field I'm currently in, and I don't have to travel. I'm over traveling for work. I have no need to ever get on an airplane to go to a job. I mean, when I get on an airplane, it's going to go on vacation. And, I've happened to have fallen into a really sweet gig where it's an interesting control room because I'm in the control room with the director. So I listen to him acoustically. The only thing I listen to out of my panel is the audio channel and the tape guy. So he can call me and tell me I forgot to route the ISOs to him. But I just listen to everybody acoustically in the control room. And it's a little confusing because a lot of times there's loud talking going on and there's people on conference calls sitting right behind me running other Zoom meetings. But, I drive into work in the morning and I sit in an air-conditioned control room, and it's a very simpatico environment. And that's where I'm staying.
It's kind of funny that a lot of people I know don't like to travel. I stayed in Arizona for 30 years, 23 years of it doing D-backs baseball. So I didn't have to travel all that much, but now I'm traveling a lot. I don't mind it. I get to the airport super early. I always have somewhere to sit. I'm
for
chilling
40
with my headphones on. I'm on the plane. I'm watching movies.
For 40 years, I fully agreed with that. I loved the travel. I liked going to Vegas because I have favorite restaurants there I like to go to. But
right, it's not about the gambling.
No, I don't gamble. So
neither do I.
I go to Vegas for the job and the restaurants. But now I don't need to travel, and I'm good just staying there.
Yeah, it's interesting how, and we'll hear from some other folks here in a second, because a lot of these folks on this panel have been doing this for a minute or two and have actually sat in some of these chairs, and then therefore have a little bit better understanding. It's like I took the caveat out of, or the one variable out of assuming that there's enough money, but I didn't take out any of the other variables. And so, where Mac is like, oh, it'd be great to be a broadcast A1, but he knows what that means. And so it doesn't have a kind of, glorified idea or romanticized idea of, I'm mixing the Grammys, and I'm on an SSL bajillion, and I've had 47 rehearsals to tweak every last little thing down to the perfect thing, and and I'm in this Zen music. Like, that's not reality, kids. It's not what live broadcast mixing is. Like, not even remotely. It's basically, I am on fire. The truck is on fire. The director is on fire. The director is pissed off that I'm not putting out the fire that he is on, but I am also on fire, and I'm running from the truck, which, by the way, is on fire. And everyone is yelling at me in speakers to tell me that, oh, by the way, there's also 4 other things that are on fire. And one of those people is saying, the effects mic, there's like a little bit too much bounce in the deck mic. It's like a little too boingy. Can you fix the little boing? It's like, I'm on fire. Like, I can barely keep up with what's going on. And yeah.
That's where you get on the comms and tell the front of house guy that it's too loud.
Right.
Turn it down.
There's no front of house guy in sports, buddy.
Usually on the big musical shows, the music truck does all the music mixing, and they don't listen to anybody. They really just listen to the music, and you take that feed and you do with what you want. The director's never yelling at them.
But devil's advocate, it's one of those, like, everybody then thinks that's the gig I want. Like, that's the one I want more. I was just literally reading an article 2 days ago. The guy who mixed the latest Super Bowl, mixed the music for the latest Super Bowl. And the very last, like, 2 or 3 lines of the article, it's a tech article, said, oh, and by the way, you know, everybody wants to Monday morning quarterback what the Super Bowl halftime show sounds like. I had like 4 producers / artist people / whatever standing right over my shoulder, telling me exactly what they wanted it to sound like. And I made it sound like what they wanted it to sound like, but nobody's going to yell at them. They're just going to see my name in the credits and go, Brian Maddox doesn't know what he's doing because the vocals were buried. So even when you get to be that cool, I'm mixing the music for the Super Bowl, it's like with 15 people standing over your shoulder going, you know, I can't hear my girlfriend, essentially. And so, yeah, not always the best. I have my answer to this question, but nobody wants to hear from me. Who's next?
I'll go.
Go.
So I'll tell you what I like and want to keep about my job, which is that it's very variable. You know, sometimes I'm an A1, sometimes I'm an A2, sometimes I'm an RF coordinator, or, you know, some other job like that. So the variety of it, really, I would not want to change any of that. And the thing I would want to change, I think, is to do more music, because I do a lot of corporate events. And I started to do more of what I used to do is what I want to do, which is music and theater. That's how I got my start in the industry. And I did that for many years, shifted away from it to make some money, really. So I started doing more corporate events, and then came back around to doing some theater when I moved to the San Francisco Bay Area, which was nice. I did a little bit of theater and corporate stuff, so that was good. And I'll just answer this question also along with, I don't have to be sitting out front and being the master A1 music, whatever that job is. You know, I like doing that. I really do. But you are in the hot seat, as some of you have mentioned. I've done some broadcast. I don't want to do that for a living. It's too much pressure. But the people who do it, much respect, because I see what you do. And the people who are really good at it are just amazing at that job. And it does require having, I don't know, 10 ears on your head somehow. But I love being an A2 because it's the support role. And I like that the fact that you, as an A2, you are really like in a way, you're the team leader, even if because the A1's so busy, you know, that they can't often be the team leader. You are their eyes. You're acting in their best interest. And I like that role. You're also very much a hub of the production team. Everybody's, they go to the A2 because the A1 is usually too busy. Sure, they go to the A1 for certain things. The A1 has to make certain decisions, but I just really like that role. It's really it really makes you feel like part of the entire production team to be the A2 position. So I like doing that a lot, but I wouldn't like doing it all the time. I'd have to do some A1 work and mixing and all of that to balance it out. And fortunately, I seem to have that life. I just want to mix a little more music. That's it.
I wish more people had that attitude that you just described, because I love my A2s that I work with, but a lot of times they don't have my interest in heart. All of a sudden I'll see a microphone on camera that's supposed to be pointing this way and it's pointing that way. And I'm like, dude, I'm not out there. You're put the mic out. You're supposed to pay attention to where that mic is pointing. And
well, I've said this a number of times on this show and other times, is that the best A2s think in the best interest of the A1. Like if they were the A1, how would they want it? And vice versa. The best A1s are like thinking about the A2, like what
the best interest of the team.
Exactly. It's all a team sport. It is completely a team sport. And you know I'm old enough to know that I've worked with some grumpy old sound people, you know, we probably all have. or have been that person and then changed, I hope.
I don't know what you mean. What is this? Is this I've never seen this before. A grumpy old, why would that be a thing?
Never.
I don't understand.
Well,
Yeah, I resemble that remark.
actually, though, that's
It's
okay
really
to be
amazing.
grumpy.
It's amazing the ratio, though. We have a team of 1 to 4 on a really big show,
Mhm.
and the other side of the world has 15 to 60 people, depending on the size of the show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And going back to the grumpy sound person thing, a lot of the people that I know who are A1s who get grumpy, they have a right to get grumpy. They're working long hours and all of that. And you're like, okay, I'll stay out of their way, not ask them a lot of questions. But the other one that I don't like, and I'll just say this, is audio people with attitudes. You can't do this show with any other audio engineer. I hate that. I hate that, and I will give them grief if I have a chance to.
It's a fine line, isn't it? Because you have to have enough ego to be self-confident to take the risk and do the job.
Yep.
But not so much that you're stepping on everybody else's ego.
And Michael, you said it earlier. If you've got the ego, that's fine. Just know that it's a team sport. That's really what it comes down to. You can have that ego, and I don't have a problem with that ego, but you are just one part of a team.
Yep.
The bigger part of the problem, though, is, at least in my world, I'm a freelancer. Everybody else is a freelancer. I don't get to pick my A2s. So you don't get sometimes you don't get a choice as to who you work with 98% of the time. So, you get, there's very, very good A2s out there. And there's people like the guy I had the other night that had never done the job before. We're doing a hockey show, and I got a guy who's never done the show before. Didn't know where to plug in an IFB box. I mean, just simple, didn't know how to troubleshoot anything.
That's on
I'm
the
like,
producer.
who hired this guy and why is he on my show?
Yeah.
I've kind of always been confused by the stereotype of grumpy old sound guys, because if you don't want to be here, why are you here? It's not like you were born into the business of audio. You weren't born on an audio production warehouse. Like, if you're in this setting, there was at some point you chose to be in the audio environment. So
yeah, but catering had horrible coffee and I couldn't have any of it, so I'm pissed off.
I always enjoyed being the A2 on a big show, like a sports show, because it's kind of a unique position in that as an A2, I'm all over the place. I'm in the clubhouse, I'm on the field, I'm on left field, I'm at home base, I'm all over the place, setting up microphones and antennas and wiring and pulling the talent boxes and checking things out. And the A1 is stuck in a box all day long with no windows. The camera guys are stuck at one place all day long. And, and I have this freedom to enjoy the entire arena. And it's a lot of fun doing that.
Yeah, and if you have the knowledge of what the A1 wants, it just makes the team so much better. That's what I like when I finally get out of the room and I can go A2 for somebody else. I just love it because I know what he wants. I know what's expected of me, and I completely agree with what you just said. It's such a great feeling by the end of the night. If we don't hear from anybody, we can go have a beer and just talk about the day. But man, when they all of a sudden something little tiny thing goes sideways and the production goes completely off the rails, it's just
talking about the attitude. I remember doing network sports in, I'm going to say it was the 1990s. And there was one particular director who works for one of the networks. I won't say which. This guy had a reputation of being a real hardball. I mean, this guy would fire 3 people on every show. It's like he is on comms yelling and screaming, "You're killing me, you're killing me. What are you doing here?" And it made for a really, really stressful show. I mean, everybody is, in his mind, I'm sure he's making sure people are on the ball, but it really puts people on edge. And
my friend,
the thing
did
about
you know
grumpy,
Ron Rosenblum?
I don't
Did you know
recall
Ron
the name.
Did you ever know Ron Rosenblum? You can look it up on YouTube. He used to record the comm when he used to be in A1 before he was before he worked for Clearcom, and he's got all these mixtapes out there. There's one in particular, you can go look it up on YouTube. It's called the Silverman Rap. You definitely should go check it out.
All right. I think that the notion about the grumpy old audio guy is probably people who just got tired of working with assistants and A2s who didn't know what they were doing, and made it frustrated for him. It is very much, as we're saying, a team sport, and a team effort. Everybody's got to be in simpatico. I need to know what the A1 wants. The A1 needs to know and communicate what I need to help him. And we're all trying to get the show done for the director and the producer and the client.
Well, and it's no matter what field you're in, there's a certain amount of stress if you're doing live event audio, regardless of what it is. There's a certain amount of, I talk about it all the time to my friends. The fundamental difference between what I do for a living and what most people do for a living is that my show is happening at 7:00 tonight. It is going to start. It literally doesn't matter if 3/4 of my crew fell off a cliff. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. 4 of the trucks are on fire. Nobody cares. There is no, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to finish this tomorrow because, some bad things happen. Like, Eddie called in late. So we're going to have to, we're just going to finish up tomorrow, boss. Like, this is not an option. So that does breed a lot of stress. I think the key is, like, how do you handle it? And I will say, as I've become more and more of the grizzled old audio guy, I think that probably the only way that I've really avoided becoming the grumpy old audio guy is 2 things. One, and this is not a joke, actually. I, on my way to work, coming from the hotel, in the car, in the whatever, I just look at everybody else's. I look at what other people are doing, and I just think to myself, that could be me. I get paid very well to do something I still enjoy doing after 30 years. I need to be grateful. Like, no, not kidding, not a joke. Like, this is like,
Amen.
Like, yep. For real. Like, we need to be grateful that we have good paying jobs that for the most part we had a passion for, and we got into it because we liked it. The other thing that I've done that it's sort of, in some ways it just sort of happened, but as I've gotten older, I've also sought this out, is I have not done the same thing for my entire career. And I think that what happens with a lot of old grizzled anything, but certainly audio folks, is you do this, you're a front of house guy for a metal band. And after 35 years of being a front of house guy for a metal band, every little thing that grates you about being front of house guy for a metal band is now grown to become enormous. All the reasons you got into it in the first place that you loved, you've forgotten. And I keep kind of cycling from, I started out doing a lot of music, and then but I also did press events, and I also did intercom, and sometimes I was doing RF, and then I was doing fundraisers, and then corporate things, and then I got into webcasting, and then I was traveling doing that, and then I'm doing Zoom shows, apparently, as a thing. So now that's a thing I do, but just different things, which has kept me. And I will say, Andy said, he misses doing music. And the reality is that even as a musician, guitars on the back, long hair, all that stuff, I have no interest in going back into doing music because I got burned out on all of the little things about it that drove me crazy. And I just don't really want to do that anymore. Like, it's fun. Like, it just doesn't have that much appeal to me. I'm perfectly happy to let somebody else do that. Thank you very much.
Oh, and don't get me wrong. I'd rather play music than mix music, but I am mixing a bluegrass band, I think, in a couple of weeks, Hot Butter Rum, who gets around, and they're going to be fun. I'm not going to have, like, I'm not going to have this big rock band telling me that
Right.
their monitor mixes are all wrong.
It's
Well,
also fun when you
Jesse.
don't do the same thing all the time. It's like the grass is always greener. And like you said about the variety, to me, it's like rotating the tires on your car. Doesn't matter how well aligned it is or how great a tire it is. If it's the same small thing that's nipping at you night after night for years, it's going to wear you down. And that's why you rotate the tires, and then you don't get worn down in that exact same spot over and over to the point where you become that grumpy old sound guy. And that's why I like the variety of these positions. And, you know, if I'm coming off of a long corporate run, I'm like, man, I wish I was outside at a festival somewhere. But then sometimes after a 16-hour day at a festival, you're like, you know, put me in a breakout room where, you know, I 100% agree with the variety.
Yeah, and if, you know, we don't all have necessarily the luxury of, you know, being able to do, and some of us aren't really wired to have a skill set that translates to a lot of different, and that's fine. I've just always kind of been just sort of, oh, this looks like a fun thing and interesting to figure out how to do. I think I'll go do that. I mean, I lately have started getting into mixing sports, which is weird because people don't start that when they're 56 years old, but it's, you know, it's just something different. And, you know, it's, you know, but then I'm also doing like corporate broadcasting. But then 2 weeks ago, I spent 4 days, literally, Jesse, as a breakout tech in my little local hotel down the street. And I loved it. It was like no stress whatsoever, like none. Like it was so low key. Now, you know, would I want to do that every week? No, it was completely also unchallenging. And I would lose my mind if I did it all the time. But it was very low key, and it was very, I mean, you know, presenters were walking in and they were just like, when I told them they had a choice between lavalier or a handheld, they were like, you have microphones? Like they were, you know, so pleased that I had microphones instead of, you know, I have all my music on an SD card. What do you mean you don't have an SD card reader? You know, you're supposed to have an SD, you know. I mean, I totally feel what you're saying there, Fred. It's like, you know, that whole thing, like when folks just kind of walk in and they just so desperately want to make everybody else's day bad.
I feel bad for graphics operators on corporate events, the people who they tell them, you need your stuff in 3 days before the event. And they walk in 15 minutes before they walk on the stage and go, hey, can you make all these changes in my PowerPoint presentation? No.
Yeah, I have.
Whoever said that.
More and more lately, these things are splurging for the speaker ready room with a dedicated guy who puts stuff on the server. It seems to be more common even on the smaller events lately. I'm not sure why.
Oh, I agree with you, Jesse. And I think actually the reason for it is just that the industry as a whole has just finally said enough already, because we just, I mean, you know, and some of us that are contemporaries of me remember doing corporate events in the early 90s or maybe before that, you know, when like PowerPoint just barely invented. And like, yeah, you had to have that junk done like 2 weeks out, and then it took an hour to load off a floppy. Like there were no changes going to happen. But over time, that thing got, you know, later and later and later, and we were able to make changes later and later and later and do things later and later and later. And of course, you know, no matter how much you achieve, no matter how good you get at doing that, the next person is going to want it that much later and that much later. Until now, and I know several of you have seen this, someone's on stage, the next presenter walks in while that person's on stage, they go up in 3 minutes, we're in the middle of show, and they're like, I have this thing on my phone, but I'm gonna need to make like 47 changes, and I need to also combine it with a YouTube video, and you know, or
I think we need to go back to slide projectors.
You can do that, right?
And the problem is, Michael, is that we sort of kind of did.
Right.
Like way, way, way too much. And I think that finally there's been enough of we're pushing back. The industry is finally pushing back and going, we have a room. You go to the room. You prep your things in that room. And that's it. Like, and end of story. Right. And then you go give your presentation. You don't bother the people backstage. You don't make changes.
It's a level of professionalism. You know, it's we set the bar here, and the bar is not going to move. And if you're going to try and bring something that brings the bar down, we're going to say, no, sorry, you know, we'll try again next time.
I'm just speculating, but maybe part of the reason for the push towards everybody putting these presentations on the server is because they got used over the last couple of years, got used to having to upload these things to a Dropbox or whatever. Mm-hmm. Anyways, instead of just walking around with a flash drive. So now it's becoming just more common protocol that, yeah, you got to have your stuff on the server and we're going to push it out to the rooms.
Well, and that's also not hard to do anymore. Like that just that mechanism right there, you know, just a few years ago was very difficult. We're going to have a speaker ready room and then it's going to push stuff to these other rooms. Like that really wasn't a thing. And so, but you know, I've got one friend in particular who's a graphics op, and she is way too good at her job. And because of that, like her clients got used to, she's running a show with her left hand and she's bringing up the backup machine with her right hand, and she's making changes and doing Photoshop changes. And this, finally, I kind of sat her down and I said, you need to stop. You need to just say, no, I'm in show. I can't do that, because no matter what, then it was like, while she's doing this and this, she's got somebody else going, can you load this and convert it can you just put that on another machine and convert it while you're doing, like, oh, you can juggle 6 balls. Can you please juggle 7? Oh, you're doing 7. Can you please juggle 8? And
yeah, it is kind of learned over time to know where that line is of like, when you start out, people throw things at you and you think, oh shit, this is my job. I have to do this. And then over time you learn, like, wait a minute, no, this isn't my job. I don't have to do this. And I can say no to certain requests that come your way.
Yeah. Well,
in my industry, it's the replay people. You know, when I used to be a tape operator before I stepped into the audio chair, 2 machines was about the most you could deal with. And now you have EVS operators that are running 6 and 8 machines by themselves. And like, how can you possibly manage that much? You know, keeping notes on all the tracks. And it's just, you know, just because somebody does it or can do it doesn't mean that everybody can.
Yeah, well, I think about things that you can do that, I mean, I don't know, like steer it back to audio, I guess. If you can do something, like pull it off by the skin of your teeth, you know, can I be my own A2 and get all these mics up and run back to the console or whatever, if you're throwing some screwed up situation. But is it something that you're going to be able to, is it a situation that you want to regularly put yourself in over a long period of time where eventually you're going to be set up to fail and not deliver optimal results?
Well, that's the thing, though. You should only take on something really realistically that is going to take up to 75% of your bandwidth, because you need that extra 25% to handle the oh by the ways and the oh my god that just crashed and that kind of crap. If you take on a job that you're already at 110%, what room do you have left to handle any of that other stuff? So you, as an audio guy, at least for me, I've had to learn, even though I hate it, I've had to learn to say, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that right now. I've got to focus on this.
Sometimes you get thrown in these things, though. I don't know if I talked about this a few weeks ago. We were doing spring training in March in Arizona, and I was told I was in a rush truck. I have a Calrec Brio. I'm mixing a full show. I show up. I'm in a cubicle inside of a cubicle truck with a 13-inch laptop trying to run an X32, and everybody's in Chicago. What?
Wow.
I've never seen this thing before, you know.
That does not sound like fun.
No, and he has reported on it, and he did not have a good time. It did not spark joy, which we can all understand. One of the things that I've really started getting, I think, better and better at in the last few years is setting expectations. I think ultimately that's what it comes down to. And I did an event, I don't know, 6 weeks ago or something. And it was, frankly, it was one of those things that was really like a guy and a half, really. Like, you know, somebody would be up on stage talking, and then 4 people would walk in and they needed to get microphones. And there was somebody still up on stage talking. But honestly, like, it really wasn't a big enough gig to actually have an A2 there for 10 hours a day to do what was legitimately 3.5 minutes worth of work. So they didn't have an A2 there. I was the guy, but I just set the expectation of, if someone's up there talking and then you hand me 3 people that need to be microphoned, I'm going to walk away from the mixing console and I'm going to put microphones on them. And if that person walks off the stage and walks in front of a speaker and it feeds back, I'm sorry. Yep. Like, I said it in a very nice way, but it was just like, I'm setting the expectation that you know, if you're scheduling this, there's only one me. So if you're scheduling this in such a way that for brief periods of time, I have to do 2 things, just understand what the trade-offs are. For this particular event, it was fine. Nothing bad happened, and I did not stress about it. It was, I need to mic these 3 people. Took 4 steps away from the mixing console. I became A2. I ignored the stage completely, put microphones on them for 3 minutes, and then I came back and did the thing. For this particular job, that was the appropriate thing because it just wasn't a big enough job to justify adding another position. It just wasn't. Like some jobs, it was like 50 people in a little room. It wasn't enough of a gig to justify having another position. But I needed to make sure people understood that this is the trade-off.
I'm glad your gig went well, but if an A2 has to work in 5-minute bursts every 2 hours for a 10-hour day, they're still worth their money. It's I agree with you 1,000%, Mac. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I 1,000%. It's just, you know, I guess I used a poor example that I don't want to give anyone the wrong impression. A2s are, if they only work 11 minutes out of an entire day, they are worth the 11 minutes because the A1 is focused. But sometimes it's just the level of the gig. You know, it's, you know, and some of this was, I also, like, it was a long-term client. I know them well, like, we have a good rapport. It was appropriate to that particular gig. If I didn't know them, I probably wouldn't have done it. Because if I didn't know them, I would be like, no matter how much I set the expectation, they're still going to throw me under the bus when something goes wrong. I know better. And so, yeah, I agree with you, Mac, 1,000%. That
the other reason I give them too is not only will they help with that, but if something does occur backstage with the system, whatever, that A2 can go take care of that while I'm still doing damage control out front.
Yeah, and they also play a backup to you if you drop dead or
if I go down, now you've got a backup. You don't have to go looking.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Oh, absolutely. And again, you know, setting expectations. It's like these were relatively small meetings with breaks in between. And when the meeting got done, I retrieved the microphones and I left. And I went to go pee and I went outside and I got a little breath of fresh air. And then I came back and it was like, you know, I made sure that they understand that because there aren't 2 people here, you can't have people that are getting mic'd up 14 seconds after the previous thing happens. Like that's not going to happen, you know? And again, it's just sort of that like expectation of I'm going to have to go pee. I'm going to need to go get some water. Oh, it's lunchtime. I'm going to lunch. Oh, well, the presenters might come back early. Well, they're going to have to wait. Since I'm the only one here. Yeah. And again, for this job, that was fine. The client understood, like that's what it was, and it worked fine. But it was, you know, typically for most gigs, I don't do that for all the reasons that people are saying. The A2 is your backup. It's your, I don't feel good. It's your, I have to go pee. It's your, something went wrong backstage. It's a million things. And a rock solid A2, they tend to get tips from me.
And that must be why you're the cranky A1.
Exactly. I also, for the record, am also often the A2. So
the best A2 is an A1.
True.
Always.
So since we were talking about the positions and saying that sometimes the A2 position is not so bad, I wonder though sometimes if you take an A2 position and people think, oh, well, that guy's doing the A2 because he must not be able to be sitting in the A1 chair.
Screw them. Screw them if they think that.
Right.
Who cares?
That's easy to say, except I wonder about managing the perceptions, just from a career trajectory standpoint. If by taking these, junior positions, if in the eyes of some client or even other techs, it's like if it's just some type of look that can be perceived.
I think people that work in the business know exactly what the A2 does. And the show I was just on, was a corporate show, but the A2 had to organize 24 mics backstage with names and numbers and frequencies. And Henry Cohen was doing the frequencies, but he had to put them in, and he was really busy. And all the stage managers had a channel on their pack to talk to him.
Well, you know that, and I know that, what these jobs can entail. But sometimes, the average person, they see, oh, well, that's the guy behind the console who's.
Well, but Jesse, the average person isn't the one hiring you. The average person isn't the one paying you. And that, number one, I never worry about it because my competency level is going to come through no matter what. And if they don't understand that, I can't think of any situation where that's ever cost me a gig or anything like that, ever. Because
but it
did know,
or you could say, well, this Brian Maddox, you were mixing a breakout room last week. What are you doing, man? Like you worked on the Olympics, dude. I thought you were like doing the big shows. And they see you so running your own mics in a breakout room somewhere. There is some sort of personal branding thing that you need to be cognizant of, at least.
Jesse, you're 100% right. In fact, really the only reason that I can quote unquote get away with it is the fact that I have a freaking 30 years worth of experience and relationships and everything else. I can be a little bit more, but you're absolutely right. It's a terrible misunderstanding in our industry that an A2 is somehow half an A1 or not, an A1 in training or something like that. And I work really hard to fight to dispel that at every opportunity that I can with everybody I ever talk to. And I'm the first one that if I am the A1 on the gig, to make sure people understand, like the one who's holding this together is Joe or Ed or Amy or whoever's my A2 or whatever, and to make sure that people understand. But you're right, especially when you're developing in your career, you do have to watch out for optics and if I'm just I take this little thing or that little thing, if I take a stagehand gig just because I don't have anything else better to do for the weekend, are people going to think I guess he's got a drinking problem or something because he can't get any good work. Ed Whillock, I don't think you've significantly weighed in. A bunch of us haven't really answered the question, but that's totally fine. We've at least talked. But Ed, what do you have to say?
So before we walk off this A2 thing, before I get into something else, something that Brian, you said optics and what Andy had been talking about earlier about like how a good A2 like knows what an A1 wants. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And the optic piece of that is you want your A2 to not wish he was the guy who was the A1. When you have an A2 who just wishes he was in the driver's seat, that is can become a miserable situation, especially if it is someone who would be typically that grumpy A1 and they're your A2 and they are like, well, why am I the A2? And, not that I've encountered that, but it's plausible that could happen.
It was only that one gig.
That guy. I'm ashamed to admit that I used to be that A2 who was trying to impress the A1 with my knowledge of the console intricacies or whatever. It's a bad look. I was that guy until I was the A1, and I had that guy on my show. I was like, oh man, I don't want to be that fucker.
Well, and that is a lesson that I think most of us have had to learn early in our career when we were in the support role and we were bringing things up like that. And we didn't know we were second guessing our A1. And when I say think like the A1 without, and I didn't say it earlier, but I should have said without second guessing them, because you're really doing your job, So don't second guess them. But that is a lesson that I think you have to learn by screwing it up and second guessing them. And then you'll get that look or that response, and you'll go, oh, okay, I pissed off my A1 by even just asking that question, because either I second guessed them or I asked the most obvious question in the world of something I already should have known.
Yeah, or just
I
didn't
see
stay in
that
your lane in
completely
general and
different
focus
light.
on your own job.
Oh, is that you, Fred, who said that?
I see that in a completely different light. I wish that people would ask those questions, and it's because I love to see people move up. I love to see people advance their career. I love. It gives me a better relationship with the people that I work with when I know that they're trying. And if they want to come and ask me, if they want to come and sit in my room, I'm happy to teach anybody, anytime, anywhere. When I was doing baseball and I had a relationship with a Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences school in Arizona, there would be a week. I got the Diamondbacks and Fox Sports and my employers to get all together. We signed contracts. I had 10 kids a night come down and walk through my truck and sit and ask me questions live while I'm on the air. And these kids would come in and they were just like stunned of what was going on here, and say, okay, what do you want to know? You're in the music school right now. You're learning how to do Foley, and you're learning how to do music, and you're learning how to do this, and you're learning how to do that. And this is a different discipline. Right? This is live.
Yeah, don't get me.
It was just so gratifying to have that teaching thing. I didn't think I'd ever like it, but once I got exposed to it, it was so cool. And seeing people, A2s especially, that just that moved up. Perfect example is the guy in Los Angeles named Mark Ancliffe.
Moving up, though. See, you're already talking about the A2s as if they're in an inferior position, though, right now.
Well, but
no. I want them to be the team member. I want to be able to call my employer and say, hey, can they do that job that night, and I'll do their job. I want to have a position where I don't have to always be the person sitting.
Well, and realistically, there's always different levels of all of this. Not every A1 is capable of operating at all levels. Not every A2 is ready or capable of operating at all levels. It's just a reality. If you've only been on the job for 18 months and you're operating as an A2, you don't have the experience that probably the A1 does. It doesn't mean that you're lesser of a person or less capable. You just don't have the experience yet.
Yeah,
that's all.
I guess I would put it this way. I like to be the guy on site who is the best at my particular role on that site.
Yep.
So
that's the goal.
And sometimes, I mean, a lot of A1, especially if you get into like the touring world, these A1s don't know shit about the system tech side of it. And you are the expert in your role. So I guess it doesn't feel so much like a junior position if you are the best suited person on site for that role.
And I'm going to rewind and come back to what you just said also, Jesse, but to Fred's point, when I say second guessing, I mean, obviously you were in a position where you could, teach while you were doing your job. And when the pressure's on and you've got an A2 second guessing you, that's when it gets really annoying, because, they don't know what you're thinking and you don't have time to explain it to them. It's that when the pressure cooker's on, that's really what I'm talking about. I love teaching. I love sharing what I know because I had some great mentors who did the same for me. And I'm all about pay it forward.
Well, yeah,
I agree with you. It's not the second guessing.
Yeah.
The second guessing is a different deal.
Yeah. And to Jesse's point and Michael's point all about that is that early in my career when I was, like I worked for a company. The entry level position was you were an A3 and then you got to do some A2 work, and you were an A2 for a while, because the company I worked for had 2 A1s, and then they slowly moved me into the A1 position. And I didn't even ask for it. It was just, that was the way you developed your career at this particular company. And I was really thankful. I had, watching them work and what they did was great. It was really, really a great training ground. So that A2 position, like where we're talking about, at some point in your career, it is, yes, you are lower on the totem pole, and then eventually you come up. But I've heard of shows where they hire the A2 first because the show's easy to mix, but backstage it's a hard show. Yeah, so they want that guy or that gal who can just like do mic changes all friggin' day and look at the system and make sure that's all working and keep half an eye on Dante and all that stuff and workbench and, and keep it all up, all those balls up in the air, because the A1 out front is like, oh, okay, I got to bring up that mic. Oh, there's a tape roll. Okay. It's easy.
I prefer the terms fader pusher and system technician.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, well, and I'm going to cut into here only because, and I'm going to go back to Ed because he got interrupted and I didn't forget. And I'm going to bookmark, put a pin in the entire A1, A2 long discussion about how much I hate those two terms, how much they have 14 different meanings depending on who you are and who you talk to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Everyone's nodding their heads because we all know what I'm talking about.
What I hate even more is the concept of A3. There is no such thing. There are lots of A2s. There is no A3.
Nothing. We're no more numbers. We are not going to even talk about it. There will be no numbers for the remainder of our time together today. It's just different roles. And I totally agree with you, Jesse. In fact, I always on site, I'm like, what are you doing? I'm just pushing faders for you, or I'm just putting microphones on for you, or what, and at the end of the day, who cares what my title is? I either do my job great and they hire me back, or I don't, and they don't.
Amen.
Ed Whillock, you started into a preamble and then we completely cut you off. So you can go ahead and amble now if you want. We can get to the amble part.
So, like what Andy and you, Brian, had said earlier, like the having the ability to do multiple roles. Thankfully, I'm lucky enough to do that as well, and it keeps me from getting burned out. So I absolutely love the position that I'm in currently. I do a lot of corporate. In the summers, I get to do some music festival stuff. I like Andy, I would love to do a little bit more music. And also like Andy, I don't have to be the guy out front, and I have a certain amount of diplomacy to me that I do very well as a monitor engineer dealing with talent. So I get put in that role a lot on festival dates and stuff. So, and I'm happy to do that. What's interesting, I actually was just telling someone the other day, when people ask you, oh, what would you go back and tell your 18-year-old self to do? What's the one bit of advice you would do? I always say I would tell my 18-year-old self to get over myself and start doing corporate, because that when I did that, my whole quality of life changed, just because I started making a lot more money. My life was more structured. I wasn't pushing boxes out of a dirty, stinky bar at 2 a.m, and all that kind of stuff. So, I really still, I do corporate and I enjoy doing corporate. And when I was younger, it was kind of like, oh, that's where, your rock and roll dreams go to die, as I'm sure we've all heard. But corporate's been a good life for me. The one thing that I haven't really done a ton professionally, I've produced a few things, and it's funny because of my background is studio work, and it's something that I've always wanted. Like in my dreams, one day I'm just gonna have like this killer basement studio, man, with like the analog stuff and the this and that, and I have a collection of some outboard gear, some stuff that I've kept, and when I commissioned this studio, some stuff that was mine that I picked up, and that's one of the things I think if I didn't have to worry about money anymore, maybe I would focus on that. But but really, like you and Andy said, the variety of it. I think if I had to do one thing for the rest of my life, I would get so bored with it. You guys, some of you guys know I do video too, so it's like I like to keep my whole career like very varied and have my hands in a bunch of different places, just so I don't get bored and so I don't get worn out. I like Jesse's analogy of the rotating your tires. My little guy, sorry. So yeah, it's I can't say that I would narrow down one thing. I can say there's one position I would hope I never do again, and that is dance recitals. A1 for dance recitals. I can wholeheartedly say if I never do another dance recital, I would be fine with that.
Sir, that's the penance, sir.
And that I can think of no better way to end our time than, God, please don't let me ever have to do dance recitals. There was a couple of you I didn't hear from your actual real answer, but everybody got to chime in a little bit. So, it's been a pleasant hour. I think ultimately my answer is Ed's answer, which is I like that I've done a lot of different things. There's almost nothing that I've done in the past that I desperately want to go back to and can't. It's like, I did those things and I'm good with being done with those things. I'm kind of moving forward to what's the next interesting thing that I haven't done that I want to at least try and see. I mix webcasting events from my house. I do YouTube shows. I mix in trucks. I mix in studios and warehouses. I mix in breakout rooms. I do church mixing, I do intercom, I do RF, I do a little bit of everything, and I like that. It keeps my brain working, it keeps my brain sharp, because once I've figured out how to do something, it's just not that terribly interesting anymore. So hopefully that's what I'll get to do more and more of, including this silly little show. So I want to thank everybody for joining us for another rousing episode of the Audio Opinion Show. I want to thank all of my panelists individually, but I don't really want to because it'll take too much time. I'll have to name their names and I just don't care that much. But anyway, if you're interested in being on the panel or having anything to do with this show, underneath the description in this YouTube video, you will see a little link that says send an email here. You'll get on the email list and you'll get an email from us, and us is of course just me, letting you know when we're doing this thing, and y'all can come on. Really, the only qualifications is that you have a pulse, that you have an opinion about something to do with audio, and that's pretty much it. Expertise is not necessary, as has been demonstrated this week. So I appreciate everybody for stopping by, and with that, I'm going to attempt to roll that fabulous bean footage.
Yeah, well, that's like just your opinion, man.